Merry Christmas and happy holidays, everyone. Today I've got the third version of my 2020 NFL mock draft, and if you thought my Thanksgiving edition was over the top with Turkey Day references, well, I really decked the halls out on this one. I was feeling merry AF, and I included the second round picks of the teams that don't have first round picks this year, so Bears fans, Rams, Texans, Steelers, stay tuned to the end because I got a little present for you. The order of this mock draft is based on my projections for the last couple of weeks of the season because when I compared those to the current standings, they were quite different, and the last 2 weeks have a drastic impact on the order of this, and you see it as early as the third overall pick. But unless I nail the winners for these final 32 games of the season, you can expect the real draft order to fall somewhere in between the current standings and the order in this mock. You can check out my picks for week 16 right after this if you need help seeing how I think your team finishes with a certain pick, but mostly everyone is already within a few picks of where they should end up. I think the Buccaneers-Falcons matchup for week 17 actually had the most variance for where either of those teams could end up, and it was a difference of like 6 or 7 picks, so that's going to be an interesting matchup because both of those teams could use a pick in the top 12, but they end up with like 16 or 17 if they win. The goal for this mock draft is 2,000 likes. I hope I'm not getting too greedy this Christmas season, so please show your Christmas spirit by helping me reach that goal. And I may be biased, but if you love NFL mock drafts, then I highly recommend subscribing to this channel because I put a lot of effort into my mock drafts and plan on doing quite a few unique versions this year, and I'd love for you to be a part of the journey. With that said, let's roll the intro and jump right into this mock draft. It's not often that we can write in the number 1 overall pick using basically permanent marker before the college football season is even over. Typically it's in pencil and we have to erase it at least a few times before the draft gets here. And those years where we know for sure who's getting taken number 1 overall really early on, it's usually because it's a generational talent like a Myles Garrett or a Jadeveon Clowney. Andrew Luck is one of the few quarterbacks to fall into that category, but I don't think a lot of people look at Joe Burrow as a generational talent. I know I don't, and that's probably why it took him so long to get his chance to really show what he can do. He wouldn't even be this early of a lock to go number 1 if the Bengals weren't picking first, but the stars are aligning for him and he just seems to be the right guy at the right time, so hopefully he'll be able to bring the Bengals out of the basement and back to relevancy. Locking up the first overall pick this early is rare, but locking up the top 2 picks is like seeing Bigfoot. The only thing truly up in the air with the second overall pick is which team is actually going to be picking here, but positional value plus best player available will take over regardless of the team, and Chase Young checks all of the boxes. Alright, and here's where this mock is going to take a turn that you probably weren't expecting. Not only does it look like the Lions will end up with a much higher pick than they've been positioned for in current standings format. I mean, I was kind of blown away by this scenario too because I haven't thought about the Lions having such a high pick to choose from, and the talent that they get to pick from at number 3 overall is a lot different than I've typically seen for them, minus the 2 guys that we've pretty much already locked up. Matthew Stafford's career looks like it's in jeopardy, and the Lions need to take advantage of picking this high even if Stafford comes back for the 2020 season. Tua Tagovailoa was supposed to be the guy here, or at least the next quarterback up, but I'm still on the fence about him getting picked in the top 20 or even the first round altogether. That's going to push Justin Herbert way up draft boards in a similar fashion to the Daniel Jones rise last year. He's got all the physical tools you could ask for in a traditional quarterback package, and on top of that, he's reportedly an awesome teammate that people gravitate towards despite his quiet demeanor. Let's just hope that he's more of an alpha than former Beta Oregon quarterback Marcus Mariota. Whichever team wins between the Giants and Redskins week 16 matchup is going to get Georgia offensive tackle Andrew Thomas as a consolation prize for losing out on Chase Young. This feels pretty predictable as of right now, but once you get to the 3rd or 4th pick of any draft, you start to enter random trade scenario territory. And depending where the Redskins go with their head coach and the schemes they're running could determine if they feel like they just need to trade down or if Andrew Thomas is the man. With the former first overall projected team falling to the 5th pick, they've really missed out on some much needed elite talent. I'm usually all for tanking to the max, but I actually think that this was pretty necessary for the Dolphins so they could kill the quote worst team in NFL history narrative. Now they can actually attract some free agents because Brian Flores was able to keep the ship afloat. There is still a lack of blue chip talent, and this defense needs to be able to slow down passing attacks if they even want to have a chance in 2020. Right now, Xavier Howard is the team's top corner, but he was a little bit exposed this year against some of the top wide receivers, but that could just be a product of the lack of pass rush and overall talent on this defense. But I think that Ohio State cornerback Jeffrey Okudah could be the number 1 corner on this team within a year or two, and that would give the Dolphins the Stephon Gilmore that they need to make this defense work, kind of like its New England counterpart. It's a deep draft of cornerbacks, but none of them as sure of a thing as Okudah, and he's one of the last elite prospects available in this mock draft. I actually remember scoffing at the Browns for doing this 2 years ago with Denzel Ward, but it actually worked out really well, and I see similar potential in Okudah. This holiday mock draft was sponsored by Manscaped. Guys, the holidays are here, and whether or not you've gotten that special someone a gift or not, don't underestimate the power of the gift of grooming. It's cuddle season after all, and it can be really easy to forget the old jingle bells until it's too late. Manscaped created the first manscaping kit that makes manscaping safe and easy, precision engineered tools for your family jewels. The Lawnmower 2.0 trimmer is waterproof and features their skin safe technology that guarantees if you nick your Santa sack, and you can send it back. And yeah, you could get a Lawnmower 2.0 for someone else to stuff their stocking, but 'tis the season to treat yourself with that money you got from winning your fantasy football league, and Manscaped has been kind enough this holiday season to hook up my subscribers with 20% off and free shipping. Just use promo code NFL20, and for a limited time you get a free travel bag and a free pair of boxers with your purchase. Big thanks to manscaped.com for sponsoring this video. It was fun to give the Cardinals CeeDee Lamb in my Thanksgiving mock and reunite him with Kyler Murray, but this is my Christmas mock draft, and I'm about to give the Cardinals what is basically the equivalent of opening up an industrial-sized bag of new socks. You might not want it, but you probably need it. And the Cardinals, they definitely need some help along the offensive line. Iowa offensive tackle Tristan Wirfs is grading out to be one of the best linemen in this draft, and with the increased emphasis on having a good right tackle in the league, he's looking at being selected in the top 10 of this draft. The Panthers are one of those teams that won't have a clear and obvious need in the draft until we see some of the offseason play out and answer some questions like, who's their head coach? What kind of defensive scheme is he going to run? Is Cam Newton coming back? Until we have some of those answers, I'm going to give them the most versatile defensive lineman available in AJ Epinesa. He can play in whichever scheme they end up with and would be a nice complement to last year's edge, Brian Burns, who might end up with his hand in the dirt more if they switch back to a 4-3 to better suit linebackers Luke Kuechly and Shaq Thompson. While the Panthers have clear questions, the Jets have much more uncertainty heading into the offseason. You don't know if the head coach is coming back, or the running back, or the number one wide receiver for that matter. Now, I don't think that the Jets should let Robbie Anderson go because he'll probably go blow up in a consistent offense, but I would understand if they took a look at the wide receivers that they could get in the top 10 of the upcoming draft and decided to take that gamble in letting Robbie Anderson go and starting over with a Jerry Jeudy or a CeeDee Lamb here. So far in the 3 mock drafts that I've had, I've flip-flopped on the 2 each and every time on who goes first, but when it comes down to it, I do think that Jerry Jeudy will be the top wide receiver off of this board and could go as high as wherever the Redskins pick. There are a multitude of directions where the Jaguars could go here. Offensive line, corner, defensive tackle, and I'm a big believer in taking the best player available at a position of need, even if it's not the biggest need. The Jaguars basically impeached Tom Coughlin, and head coach Doug Marrone is likely right behind him. So the identity and front office makeup of this team could change significantly in the upcoming months. I kind of hope that the defense will continue to be their strength in the immediate future, and in the scheme, the linebackers are the core of the unit, and Myles Jack just isn't reliable enough to carry a defense alone, and Telvin Smith just up and left this team right before the 2019 season. Now that we hear about all the dysfunction in the front office and how they were just finding guys even though they weren't allowed to, well, it kind of makes a little bit more sense why he would have just up and left the team. But in case it was for other reasons, I think you've got to address this linebacking core, and Isaiah Simmons out of Clemson is one of my favorite players in this draft and could make this a much more versatile defense with his ability to cover tight ends. This guy is a 3-down linebacker that you would never have to take off the field, and if Telvin Smith comes back in 2020 and you have Myles Jack and Isaiah Simmons as your other 2 linebackers, this would be one of the most athletic units that I think we've ever seen. It's becoming increasingly clear that the Raiders locker room is much better off without Antonio Brown as a part of it, but their wide receiver core was kind of designed with him in mind as the number 1 wide receiver. Tyrell Williams is as physically gifted as any wide receiver in the league, but if he was truly consistent enough to be a number 1 wide receiver, then the Chargers would have never let him leave for a division rival. CeeDee Lamb is an ideal wide receiver 1 and would help a guy like Derek Carr, who is running out of chances as John Gruden's starting quarterback. Now, Gruden and Mike Mayock, they killed it in the last draft despite whiffing on the earliest pick that they had in an attempt to be safe, I think. So I expect them to get a little bit flashy with this one and grab somebody that can make an impact, but also sell tickets. They are going to be moving to Vegas this year, so those kind of things will definitely be factoring in to moves made this offseason. Speaking of the Chargers, their offensive line really failed Phillip Rivers in his final season as their starting quarterback, and it seems like Tyrod Taylor is going to get a chance at the starting gig in 2020, so this thing needs to get fixed. Jedrick Wills seems to be the best guy out of Alabama this year, which has had its fair share of hits and misses in the NFL. Tyrod's mobility should help, and then maybe they can land a guy like Jalen Hurts or Jordan Love in the second round and really feel good about laying down a good mobile quarterback system for the future. The reason I feel like they might be leaning towards this kind of a system is because Easton Stick was brought up a few times in the comments of my last mock where I had them taking Justin Herbert. I really appreciate you guys bringing this to my attention because I kind of forgot about this guy. But Easton Stick, he took over at North Dakota for Carson Wentz and is a really mobile quarterback. I think the phrase is sneaky athletic. So they could ride with Tyrod and Easton to see if he can develop, but he was only a 5th round pick, so I wouldn't be surprised to see the Chargers invest a little bit more in the quarterback position this year. But first things first, get this O-line right. After signing a 1-year deal with the Bucs, Shaq Barrett blew up early in 2019 at a pace that was pretty much unsustainable, and now he's going to be looking for big money this offseason. I don't blame him. I bet the Buccaneers, though, they'll give him the franchise tag and make him show that he can sustain that pressure on a regular basis while also drafting another guy to mold for the future to play either opposite him while also covering their tail, just in case you can't come to terms on a long-term deal. LSU's Clavon Chason is an edge rusher that I think is going to be a fast riser during the draft process due to his freaky athleticism, and his fit in the 3-4 is going to have him on the board by quite a few of these teams in the middle of the first round. So I hope you guys have been enjoying the format of these picks here. I spent quite a long time trying to find the right theme and graphics for this Christmas themed mock draft. And the one that I settled on here that I bought from a company that I use a lot of their products and stuff for designing these videos, well, it's kind of a glitchy one, and it literally took me 4 hours to render 10-second clips for the first 10 picks or so, and that's just too long. I was never going to make it through 32 picks at that pace, so I decided to round it up to 12, and I just did the 12 picks of Christmas for you guys. And for the sake of this video getting out before New Year's Eve, I figured I'd expedite the rest of the graphics with some of the older graphic packages that I have that I know don't take quite as long to create and render. Now, normally me being as OCD as I am, I would just scrap a theme that didn't allow me to make the whole video uniformed like that, but I just liked this one so much and had to do it to at least some degree. So I'm going to switch the presentation up a little bit here, but I just didn't want to throw you guys off by all of a sudden switching it up and not giving you a warning why. So let's move on to the rest of the draft. The Colts have been operating this defense of theirs without a real defensive tackle on the roster for far too long. I mean, that's a move that doesn't even work on Madden anymore, and it's unfair to these linebackers. Auburn defensive tackle Derek Brown is a beast, but he seems to either fall or get drafted too high in these mocks so far. Now that the draft order is close to being set, I think that this is his floor. But with the quarterback situation in Indianapolis being a little bit suspect, the Colts are a dark horse team to be in the market for a young prospect, or at least trading down so they can get themselves a new running back, a few more wide receivers, maybe a more athletic tight end, and build pieces around Jacoby Brissett. In the first few rough drafts of this mock, I had the Raiders skipping on the wide receiver with the earlier pick and getting their guy at corner because they need somebody after giving up on former first rounder Gary and Conley. But when I finally decided that I wasn't going to use the current standings and I was going to use my projections for the last few weeks, it just kind of fell for CeeDee Lamb to fall into their laps with the first pick. With the second pick, Christian Fulton is a much better fit for them than Gary and Conley scheme-wise, while a lot of the cornerback needy teams are looking for corners that excel in man coverage, and I think that Christian Fulton's probably one of the most balanced zone man guys in the draft. Speaking of man corners, age is catching up with Chris Harris. He might not actually even be back with the Broncos next year, so they're definitely going to be investing in this position at some point during the offseason. Trayvon Diggs out of Alabama reminds me a bit of Aqib Talib and might have one of the higher ceilings of all the corners in this draft. He's also the little brother of Vikings wide receiver Stephon Diggs. Now, offensive line is probably a bigger need for the Broncos, but free agency is probably a better place for John Elway to look because he's not very good at drafting them. Oh, Cleveland, I'm really sorry I contributed to the 2019 preseason hype of the Browns, and this time you don't even get the benefit of a high draft pick to fantasize about during the offseason. Well, hopefully I'm bringing good news here because one of my guys in this class, he's going to fall because of a rough year, and he is a perfect fit for the Browns. Grant Delpit, safety out of LSU, he was going to be a top 5 pick based on 2018, but with high expectations come overanalyzing, and the Browns could see themselves getting another DB from DBU falling into them 2 years in a row. Not to mention this guy would be a perfect fit to play at strong safety opposite of Demarius Randall. After looking like they were on pace for a top 5 pick, the Falcons turned their season around, kind of, and now they're picking closer to the range of a team that just missed out on the playoffs, which is crazy, but nonetheless, here we are. After doubling down on the offensive line last year with first-round picks, it's time to reinforce the trenches on the other side of the ball. I know it's not a deep defensive tackle class, so if Javon Kinlaw from South Carolina falls to them, I think he'd be a great fit for the Falcons next to Grady Jarrett, who They did just re-sign him to a 4-year deal before the start of 2019, but it's important to keep a nice rotation of defensive tackles, especially in this defense that relies on fast linebackers flying to the ball, so you can't have offensive linemen getting to the second level and picking those guys off. That'll also keep guys like Deion Jones much healthier for the long term. The Eagles fans didn't like my pick of T. Higgins in the last mock draft, so here you go. The fast wide receiver that you asked for, this guy's probably one of the fastest of the fast guys. Henry Ruggs III. This feels like an obvious selection at this point, since you guys are too good for baby AJ Green, but all seriousness, T. Higgins might not be a burner, but he's not slow by any means. And not many number 1 wide receivers come into Deshaun Jackson-sized package. I honestly think that Henry Ruggs III over T. Higgins would be a mistake, but I'm a man of the people, and this is what you guys asked for, so I'm mixing it up and giving you Henry Ruggs. Merry Christmas. This might feel like a stretch, but like I said earlier, I don't know how a team takes a chance on Tua much higher than this, especially because there's not as much of a need at quarterback this year as there usually seems to be. I think if the Dolphins really want Tua, they're gonna get their chance for him at really good value, and I wouldn't call them crazy to even wait on him until the last of their 3 first-rounders to take him. With 2 first-round picks, the Jaguars can afford to get cute with at least one of these, and I say you use the first one if a talented player like Isaiah Simmons is there, but they have to get a big guy for the trenches with one of these first-rounders. I don't care which side of the ball it's on. They've got to get back to being strong at the point of attack. So I went and I got you a cool new toy with the first one, and here are your socks. Another offensive lineman from Alabama. This one at least has a really cool name. Now, I'm no offensive line expert, but Alex Leatherwood was the top guy on the offensive line before Jedrick Wills overtook him with his performance this year. He's got tackle flexibility, but maybe best suited for the interior at the next level. Now, this is probably where the order of this draft will switch up the most. Once we get out of the top 20, these are now the playoff teams, and I went with a blend of my playoff predictions video that'll be coming out next week. So here are little spoilers for that, and based on that initial playoff standings based on the seeding. But first off, we got the Titans, and they're going to be a very popular dark horse contender going into 2020 for what they did in the second half turnaround this year. But if they want to be more than a dark horse, they need to improve the pass rush. Cameron Wake was an interesting signing last year, and surprise, surprise, the old man got hurt. But Notre Dame's Julian Okwara might end up being the top edge rusher taken after Chase Young, and is actually a better fit for the Titans' 3-4 defense. I was a big fan of Harold Landry coming out of Boston College a few years back, and he's having a breakout season. But I think the idea behind signing Cameron Wake was sort of a stopgap band-aid for when you could find the next pass rusher to put on the other side. Upgrading the Bills' offense is going to be crucial this offseason. I've given them Colorado wide receiver Laviska Shenault in each of my previous mocks, and I still believe that he's an ideal fit for Josh Allen in this offense, with John Brown and Cole Beasley rounding out the wide receiving core. But man, T. Higgins just seems way too good a value at this point. This wide receiver class really is ridiculous. I called him baby AJ Green earlier, and I stand by that. He seems to be overlooked in this Clemson offense with Trevor Lawrence, ETN, and all the hype around Justin Ross, which is well deserved. But T. Higgins is 6'4", but he doesn't run routes like a big 6'4" guy. I think this is just the next great Clemson wide receiver to come out. All right, I've addressed the Cowboys secondary in the previous 2 mocks because it's the most glaring need for improvement, and I'm not ready to give up on Tristan Hill just yet, and I don't want to see the top drafted player be a defensive tackle for the 2nd consecutive year. And the Leighton Vander Esch, those neck issues, they were there before they drafted him, and they still took him at 18 when I was screaming for a trade up for Derwin James. I did like LVE as an option in the first that year, especially when Derwin got picked right before the Cowboys, but I'm no medical expert, and if I knew what I know about his neck thing now, that it's already reared its ugly head and his career is in jeopardy, it feels like he was a much riskier pick. I'm mad he just teased us with that awesome rookie year, only to wonder if we'll ever even see him play again. Well, now we've come full circle, and there's still a need at safety, and possibly that need has returned at linebacker. I'm dipping back into the FSU DB well and getting another safety with nickel linebacker flex in Nasser Ladine. Help me out with that name. This guy measures in at 6'4" and could be listed as a strong safety, but then also drop down into the box on obvious passing downs to cover tight ends. Now, I've drooled over Isaiah Simmons enough, and I would mortgage some future draft picks in this draft just to go get him, but I think that he goes a little bit too high for the Cowboys to get in that range, and I'll settle for a guy like Hamza, even though he's coming off of an ACL injury and won't be ready to play until probably October. In an ideal scenario, the Cowboys could grab a corner or something in the first round, and then when this guy falls to them in the second round, they take him too and really just double down on the secondary. But I went with the reach here in the first, just so I could secure the bag and switch it up a little bit. Kirk Cousins and Dalvin Cook have made the offensive line for the Vikings a position that the team can kind of put on the back burner a little bit, but Xavier Rhodes falling off a cliff like that has made the cornerback position one that needs to be addressed immediately. Stanford corner Paulson Adebo has a similar build and style to Rhodes and gives the Vikings that bigger man coverage corner to match up with the Devontae Adams, the Allen Robinsons, and the Kenny Galladays in the division. I think that Dolphins fans were probably the happiest about the Thanksgiving mock draft that I had for them. Well, at least I hope that you liked it, because guess what? 2 out of the 3 picks in this one are exactly the same. And that's Tua and the top center in the draft, Tyler Biadasz. These 2 guys would be excellent building blocks to start this offense over with. The only difference is passing on an offensive tackle with the top pick and going for the top cornerback in the draft instead. To me, it's just all about value, and I think that you can grab some pretty solid offensive linemen still in the second round of this one. Aaron Rodgers was throwing to undrafted free agent wide receivers far too often this year, and Devontae Adams isn't getting any younger, so grab a wide receiver like Laviska Shenault, because he can contribute immediately with his ability after the catch, while also allowing him to grow into a number 1 wide receiver. The hope here would be that as Adams and Rodgers age out of the league, Shenault would be getting locked in with a second contract to be there for the next quarterback, to have a reliable, quarterback-friendly weapon in the passing game, kind of like the Packers did with Brett Favre, Greg Jennings, and Aaron Rodgers. The 49ers need more depth along the interior of the offensive line, and in my last mock, I had them taking country-strong left tackle Alaric Jackson out of Iowa, but I actually don't think that was a good zone blocking scheme fit, whereas West Coast product from Washington, Nick Harris, could be your center of the future, while getting acclimated to the NFL by taking over for Laken Tomlinson or Mike Person from day one. Weston Richburg doesn't need to be replaced anytime soon, so that's not what I'm saying, but reinforcing the interior would be wise, because a torn patellar tendon is no joke, and you don't want to rush Richburg back, so Nick Harris could give you an option to at least start at center, or just have another interior offensive lineman that you feel good about holding down the fort until Richburg is healthy again. The Patriots are always a mock draft wild card. Is Tom Brady really coming back next year? We'll see. I'm not as sold on it as everybody else seems to be, especially with the frustrations he's been dealing with in the offense this year. It's funny how much we can change though from one month to the next in mock draft world, because in my first mock draft, everyone asked for Jalen Hurts to be in it. In my Thanksgiving mock draft, I gave the Patriots Jalen Hurts, and everybody claimed it was way too high for Jalen Hurts. I'm avoiding quarterback for this team altogether, because you just don't know, and it seems silly as long as Tom Brady is projected to be the starting quarterback for the Patriots. Now, his offensive line this year has not been able to just pull guys off the street like they've done in the past and still give Brady all pro level production. So I think that they need to add another offensive tackle, and then maybe move Isaiah Wynn inside, where I thought he was better suited coming out of Georgia. They just have to shuffle this unit somehow, because it's not working the way that it's structured right now. And I'm avoiding another wide receiver or projecting a tight end here because of the adjustment period that it takes for those guys in the NFL. If Brady is back next year, I think it's more likely they load up on veterans that are trying to make a run rather than hope for production out of a rookie wide receiver. Now, I used to think that Michael Thomas would be even better if he had a decent deep threat playing alongside of him, but after this season, I don't know if it would matter. You almost don't even want another guy out there stealing targets from Michael Thomas, but I still think it's worth it to have a legit Brandon Cooks kind of wide receiver across from him, and TCU's Jalen Reagor might be the fastest guy in the draft this year. He could run a 4.2 or 4.3 and shoot up into the top 15 of the draft. Because, you know, I'm sure NFL GMs are still making that mistake and keeping the memory of Al Davis alive. But if he's there in the back end of the first for the Saints, I say you take him, whether Drew Brees is back or not. The Chiefs defense needs to get more linebackers that are made for this new 4-3 scheme, rather than the slower, plug-the-hole kind of guys they had for their 3-4. The way the draft has fallen, they've got their choice of 2 guys that I think would be a good fit. Dylan Moses from Alabama, he should be healthy enough after his week 1 season-ending injury, and he should be ready for training camp from what I've heard. But Kenneth Murray out of Oklahoma could be the safe riser through the draft process, and really isn't that much of a downgrade from Dylan Moses in my opinion. The fear with Alabama players has always been and continues to be that Nick Saban just grinds the hell out of these guys, and they're so beat up that they're already a 5-year veteran in NFL dog years by the time they get to the NFL. All right, and here we are, pick 31. I've got the Ravens here because I just have a bad feeling about the NFL MVP curse, and that it's going to keep them from winning the Super Bowl somehow. But regardless, the Ravens are in a good position to take the best pass rusher on the board, and YGM, that's what I'm calling Yetur Gross-Matos now, he might be long gone because he could shoot up boards like Montez Sweat last year, but if he's still here, I love the fit with this Ravens defense. And then finally, spoiler alert, I've had the Seahawks as a Super Bowl winner since my midseason mock draft and predictions videos, and it hasn't changed since. I just think that they're one of the best rosters, despite the glaring needs along the offensive line and questionable first round picks the last few years. Creed Humphrey out of Oklahoma Oklahoma would give the Seahawks a real center, which would allow former offensive tackle Justin Britt to play wherever they felt like he was best suited along this offensive line, and then current center or stand-in center Joey Hunt could move back to the far side of the bench where he probably belongs. All right, that's going to do it for the first round, but like I said, I've come bearing gifts for the guys whose teams don't have a first round pick this year, and of course the Bears, they actually have 2 second-round picks before any of the other teams have their first pick in the draft as of right now. So I've got 2 for you Bears fans. 'Tis the season of giving, and you know, I just felt like you guys needed some socks for Christmas too. I mean, sorry, an offensive lineman. Kyle Long has regressed to the point of being unrecognizable, and even with him coming back, the Bears can't rely on him moving forward as a starter. So I've got them taking Darrell Williams with their earliest second round. And then with this second pick, you could easily flip-flop these, honestly, but I just felt like the interior offensive line was a bigger need for them. But this second one is a little bit more intriguing because of the fall that he's had in this mock draft so far. But with Akeem Hicks getting injured multiple times this year, you're going to need another defensive lineman to add to the rotation. Raekwon Davis out of Alabama might be best suited to play in a 3-4. He's not a high production guy, but he's definitely talented and a force to be reckoned with. And defensive ends in a 3-4, they play a thankless position, so he's probably pretty used to that. Next up, we've got the Rams. Merry Christmas, Rams fans. You're also getting socks for Christmas with an offensive tackle. As for Houston, I gave the Texans a running back for Christmas because they've been asking for one for years, and Chuba Hubbard would be a nice addition for this offense. And then Steelers fans, you guys kind of got a nice little Christmas in September, I think, with Minkah Fitzpatrick. But I think that the team is probably done with the idea of Mason Rudolph being their future quarterback. It was nice that they got a little trial run with him there, and they'll get one more year with Ben Roethlisberger coming back as a starting quarterback. But this team, they've always been kind of an early adapter to the trends in the NFL. So much so that they were about 30 years early on the mobile quarterback thing when they gave Cordell Stewart a chance in the early 90s. So please, let me see Jalen Hurts on the Steelers and give him a chance to develop behind Big Ben for a year and then take over as the Steelers starting quarterback in 2021. When I think about ideal landing spots for Jalen Hurts, this is one of the top places that comes to mind. Well, that's going to do it for my Christmas mock draft, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to hit that like button and subscribe if you're new to the channel. The goal in this video is 2,000 likes. Thank you guys all so much for liking, commenting, subscribing, and all that good stuff. I hope you, your family, your friends, whoever you hang out with, I hope you all have a great holiday. Merry Christmas, and I will see you all in the next video.